I don't even know how to do that.
Yeah, I have that ability to put us in portrait mode. It's saying, I guess, because there's so many people on mobile. So, I'm supposed to hit go live on Instagram, and however, that button is not. There it is. Okay, it's working. Okay, so we are now live on Instagram for the first time
Oh, there you go.
on the
Probably
Being
because it shows
Dads.
OG.
Pardon me.
I'm sorry. I'm actually, hi, everybody. Hi. It's great. It's nice. I was reading text out loud.
Okay,
Sorry, chat text out loud,
so
and I
yeah,
don't need to.
good day, Thomas. How are you?
Hi, Ryan. I'm good. I'm good. It's well, it's 6 a.m. here on the west coast of Canada. Um, what I love to let people know is that so we live on the west coast of Canada on the ocean. I live on an island, which sounds really kind of cool that I live on an island. Um, However, if people saw the size of the island, they'd realize it's not my own private island. There's a lot of people on this island. It's quite large, but I live on an island in the Pacific Ocean. And when I wake up every day and think of that, I'm like, man, look what I get to do.
Yeah, we live in a pretty remarkable part of the world.
Yeah.
It's pretty. It is a big island, but it's not too, right? Like it feels very, a lot calmer than say the mainland, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a different vibe. When I was a kid and we would come over here on the ferry, because I had an uncle that lived on the island, so we would come over, every summer for a while, and maybe during the spring and stuff like that. And for some reason, we be on the car, and when we drive off the ferry onto the island, it literally felt like I entered a different world. It just
Totally.
had everything looked kind of different, slower pace. There was the temperature here is actually a little more arid than the mainland. So it even felt differently, like temperature wise. The sun felt a little warmer. I don't know. It was weird. I don't know if it was all in my head and I made it up or if it was actually what I was feeling.
Well, I can share the same experience. Like I think there's definitely like an energetics to it, right? Like even just being on that ferry, crossing the passage, and you're just looking out at the waves and the oceans, and sometimes you get to see dolphins and whales. But there's just like, I don't know, like a melting away of stuff that maybe isn't as important that gets left behind on the mainland, and then you just, you're on this new place, the smaller island. It's a little more calmer, it's a little more slower paced. I don't know, I've definitely experienced that going to your island, and I've also experienced that, funny enough, going from a bigger island to a smaller island.
Mm-hmm.
I used to live in Malta for a couple of years, and
Right.
Malta would be the equivalent of the mainland, where it'd be quite busy, all the main businesses and bustle. And almost every weekend, I had this opportunity to go to a smaller island named Gozo, and like getting on that ferry boat and going to that smaller island, which was a lot of farmland and some really good friends and just a different pace of things, was like, I think what really made my experience there just amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's my wife has a term for things like that. She calls it away.
Okay.
Like when you go away and you have a nice hotel room somewhere, you walk in and it's like a whole different, the bed's made a certain way, the sheets are crisp, like all it that just has a whole different feel than your home. And she calls that away. It's like, I like being away. It's
Right.
kind of going away is fun. That's what this feels like to me when
Okay.
when I come to the island. It's like, oh, I'm away.
Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool that I can see, like, I can kind of actually wave at you from, if I go down a little bit from my house to the
Yeah.
water, I can wave across from the mainland to your island and kind of see you.
Yeah, we've had calls where we're both kind of looking across the water towards each other. We're too far away to see one another, obviously, but
Yes,
it's
but
kind of funny.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's where we live. It's a good part of the world. I feel very fortunate and very grateful that we've got this greener. I mean, last week we did some traveling to the prairies of Canada, to Edmonton, and I mean, there's a lot of cool things that are going on in Edmonton. Like there's a lot of industry, and it's sort of one of the hubs of our oil and gas industry here in Canada, which could be controversial for some. There's the West Edmonton Mall, the biggest mall in North America, which is really cool. And there was I think one of the biggest team sporting events, at least in Canada, 1,800 volleyball teams descend
Wow.
on Edmonton to play in this tournament over, I think, 2 weeks time. So,
Was that
and
just this year, or do they do that every year?
it rotates. Yeah.
Okay.
So this year it was in Edmonton. I think the year
Yeah.
before it was in Winnipeg. I guess there's only a few places that can host that type of event. Like there
Yeah.
were, I think, 80 courts of volleyball going on simultaneously in this expo center.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's quite the sight and quite the organizational effort. And Edmonton's just different. We're used to the West Coast here and the lushness of the trees and nature and whatnot, and it's a very different experience. For example, going to the prairies where it's flat, you don't have
Yeah.
as much nature and trees and stuff like that. So it
It's a
was quite
rainforest.
the experience to come back to the West Coast rainforest. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't think a lot of people realize that we actually live in a rainforest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some people that live here do, because some people notice how much it rains. Yes. I mean, I grew up here, so it's not as big a deal, but some people who have moved here, like, oh my goodness, it does rain a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, says Alan. Thank you.
He's on YouTube. All right. So we
Yeah.
are using some new software. We're using Restream.
Yeah.
Got a little bit, we pushed the limits of Riverside, and it wasn't cutting it for us being able to get ourselves out to all these people that are watching right now. And so yeah.
Ah, I love it.
So we are on LinkedIn, we are on X, we are on Twitter, or that's the same thing. We are on YouTube, we are on Twitch, we are on
Instagram and Facebook.
Instagram. Yeah, yeah. So we've
Yeah.
got the tech going. Now we just, would love if there were more people that wanted to hear us talk.
Yeah, that's all you and Alan too, getting that stuff fired up. I've done nothing.
Wow.
I've got a bunch of things in the air that are eating my brain.
Okay.
There's too much. It's not so much physical due, it's mental due.
Right.
And it's time, and a lot of computer stuff, a lot of dealing with stuff in emails, and then researching things, and I find that stuff eats my brain. Like I don't know if this happens to other people, and I don't know if it's because I wear glasses as well, but I will find that after a couple hours my vision actually goes blurry,
Sure. Yeah.
and I just need to go for a walk and take off my glasses, and I'll just like allow my eyes to reset or something. It's
Well, I've had that happen myself, and we've had that happen in my last business with some of our developers that made games. Is they would literally stop being able to see straight if they worked too much. I mean, not like we
right.
asked them to do that, but some of them just really liked what they were doing, so they would work really long hours and constantly in front of the screen, and vision would go.
Right.
Fortunately, by taking a break, it can get restored, because our if you're looking at a flat, I mean, I know you know this, but I'm just going to say this for other people. And I think I experienced this in university, like looking constantly at a flat screen, our bodies naturally are kind of efficient, and they're like, well, if this is all I need to look at, and this is only how far I need to look at, well, then this is all I'm going to do. And eventually our bodies kind of get lazy and start shutting off the other functions. If we're sitting all the time, that's all. It's like, okay, well, if this is what we're going to do, then I'm going to stop using all these other things that I think I used to know. But yeah, if you take a break and then just start looking outside and exercise the eyeballs, I find that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I need to do. It's like I realize I get to that point and I'm like, oh, okay, I got to walk away from this right now, because I can't even, everything looks double. I can't even read what I'm looking at on the screen without, making it, each letter the size of the screen so I can actually decipher it.
Right.
So yeah. But anyhow, I think you guys have done a great job working with this new tech, and we're using Restream, and I've had experience with using that in my spiritual center, and yeah, you can do a lot of fun stuff with it, and you can even have people come into the call, which they didn't used to have. That's sort of a new that's sort of a new feature, right? That this can happen.
Yeah. Well, maybe the thing is we're just getting all the foundation built here, and then once we're really humming, then we'll put ourselves a little more out there. We'll have a really good audience being able to listen to this, and if nothing else, as a good friend of mine said, she's like, look, just do this stuff for your grandkids. Like, put the stuff out there that you really want your own family to learn about you and to hear from you. Like, because that's sometimes hard to, like, I'm just realizing how much I wish I would have been able to get from, say, my grandparents. Um, and um, and so yeah, if they had left some of this behind that I could then go and listen to and watch and stuff like that, that'd be amazing.
That's a really interesting idea because, when I never met on my dad's side, I never met my grandparents. They had
Right.
both passed before I was born. And on my mom's side, my grandfather died when I was, I think, 7, and we had moved away from where they lived. So, and then my grandmother died when I was, I don't know, 14ish, and I didn't see her like nearly at all from, the time I moved away. Occasionally, we'd make it back to Winnipeg and see them, but otherwise, yeah, I had no real influence from my grandparents at all in my life, other than, what my parents took and brought
Sure.
along with them. But as far as direct, relationship, and my grandfather on my dad's side, like, when I think about, they immigrated to Canada from Belgium before World War I, and then they went back. He went back and fought um, for the Belgian cavalry in World War I.
Oh, in World War I. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and, like, I woulda loved to have known that guy. Like, he was, Canada wouldn't let him join their army in World War I because he had kids and he was older. So, he decided to go get on a boat and go back to Belgium and lead his cavalry. He was a cavalry sergeant, and, you know, there he is on a horse fighting in World War I and lived to tell about it.
Right? The stories he would have of just that experience that
Yeah.
I have nothing to come even close to that.
Yeah, and just the kind of person that is that would
Sure.
do that, that was
Sure.
so like, "No, I need to go do this and
Right.
risk, if you won't take me, then I'm going back. I'll go this route
Right.
to be involved."
To be
You
able
know
to hear like what was going, like, what was his sort of philosophy in life? Like, why did he do that? Like, how did he get to that point where he's like, I got to do this?
Yeah, yeah.
And like, I think that's only going to become even harder because people are having kids later. I mean, we are living longer some in some respects, but we are people are having kids later. Therefore, their grandparents in theory are going to be older. And if they aren't living necessarily that much longer, then there's going to be even, it's going to be even harder to connect with grandparents. And, I think similarly what I experienced is I wasn't old enough to really ask them some really good questions and really understand what their lived experience was like, and like even think to know what to ask them, like, and only now, like even now, I'm finally starting to get to the place where I'm like, man, I wish I knew this. I wish I could have asked this. And, I think, of this recent opportunity I've had to interview my great uncle who did, he's 103. So he is of the generation of all my grandparents, and he's the last one living of any of my grands. So I was able to ask him questions about his lived experience through these wars, his experience, what it was like to come to Canada, or to be born in Canada, to move to Japan, to go to the United States, travel the world. What's it like to live to 103? What were my grandparents like? Like, he knew my grandmother, who I never got to meet. She passed unfortunately early with cancer. And he knew my grandfather, that would have been his sister. He
Yeah.
knew my grandfather, who was, the other side that then merged. And so it was an amazing, rare opportunity, I think, to be able to talk to someone from that generation at my age now and be able to ask, really good questions, I think, and get
Mhm.
some just amazing answers from someone who's still quite with it.
Yeah, that is beautiful, and the thing as I reflect on this, I'm not sure I would have had the wisdom and, um, uh character to
Mm,
have realized the value of that relationship if I was, 17 years old or 20 years old,
right.
and maybe it would have been, maybe they would have been the type of person that was so cool at building a relationship that they would have created one with me, right? Like, you don't know how
Yeah.
that stuff's going to go. But I think what's really cool, and I did sort of experience this a little with, Leslie's grandmother lived to 102,
Yep.
and so my kids got to experience her, somebody born in like 1914.
Right.
and moved to Canada from England, did all that, and they know her, like they still know her today. They spent enough time with her and had her around long enough that they have that experience of having their great grandmother be in their life.
Right.
So it was as a dad standing back, it was really cool to watch that and to see the impact that even has on them still today. That the fondness that they speak of that relationship and remember it with, right? It's a beautiful thing. And then
Yeah.
and then, like your great uncle, just everything he's experienced, like he's gone from a place of, where the flying machine had just been invented to to
Right.
like where we are today, where you and I are streaming on a platform that allows us to share this out to multiple platforms to connect with people all over the world. And it's crazy if, I don't know if you have to do that. Sometimes I just need to take a pause
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and just go, "Oh, man."
Wow. Yeah. Like just yeah.
And also
Well,
sometimes it's like, "Oh, man, I don't even want anything to do with it right now." Like,
sure.
it's both, right?
It can be a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When you've got AI, scraping your screen to help you understand what you're looking at and working, I mean, that's cool. And um oh great, we have an offer
Look at
for
that.
getting more followers. Thank you. Yes, for commenting on
The
that.
price is lower than any competitor.
Okay, great.
Look at that.
Well, I've never received one of those before.
Yeah.
Um so yeah,
That's
I know
all
we
that's
have
brand
talked
new,
about this
isn't it?
before. Yeah.
Nobody does that.
No, it must be a
Oh,
brand new service. I'm sure
yeah.
it's totally legit. Um I know we've talked about, our ancestors before, but I think, just to say a couple things on it again is like, if anyone is listening that like there was a question in the book Essentialism too, or was maybe in an interview that Greg did that also really struck me was like, what's your I think it was, what's your great grandmother's name, or what was even your grandmother's maiden name? It was something to the effect where it just got me thinking like, huh, there's so much I don't know about my own family. And
Mhm.
so after reading that or hearing that in the podcast, I started to like build the tree, and I'm like, huh, because I do kind of know it. Like I spent some time when I moved away to be like, okay, like I don't actually know much about my own family. And here I am on the other side of the world. I was really curious about my tree. And I'm so again am now. So I started to go up the tree, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot of blanks here, like not that far up the tree in terms of first name and last name.
Yeah, yeah.
So that really sparked an interest. And I just would ideally, if anyone's a grandparent here or a parent or a kid or a grandkid, like I think what you were saying too is like start to foster that connection with your elders or your descendants, because that connection, you just have no idea how important it could be in their life and how important it could be to serve them going forward, and how much actual wisdom and value there is to, even if you don't. This is what I've experienced with a lot of my family is they're so humble. They're like, oh, I don't really have anything to share. Like that was the experience with great uncle Arthur, is like people are like, oh, that's just Uncle Arthur, like, he's lived a good life, but there's not really that much interesting about him. I start to talk to some family about him and talk to him about him. Like the guy has a day named after him in California, like in San Diego, right? Like they have a day on their calendar, Arthur Jonishi Day, right? April 23rd. So as soon as I discover them, like, okay, there's way more here. Like we're
You
so
don't get a
humble.
you don't get a day named like a
For
day
doing
on
nothing.
in a city because you were, I don't know, you were looking, what is that? Cheese whip? Is that what that stuff is on crackers all day long?
Right.
Like
Cheese
you that
whiz, cheese
Yeah,
whiz.
Cheese Whiz. Yeah, you don't get a day named after you for putting Cheese Whiz on crackers. That's just not what happens.
And I believe every family has these. I mean, it doesn't have to be to that degree, perhaps, but like I think every family has these incredible stories that would inspire the next generations, because they're like, wow, if that's someone in my own family, like it's fine to say like whatever, Tony Robbins did that and Oprah did that and all Michael Jordan, all these people out there. But it's a little harder because they're like, well, there's so much else in their experience that I don't get that could have led to them being like that. But in your own family, this is at least my experience now, talking to my dad, talking to my mom, learning more about my grandparents, talking to Uncle Arthur, like, and even sharing those stories with my kids, they're like, wow, like that's in our blood. Like that's possible. That's in our DNA. That's in our family. They came here with nothing and they did that. They had everything taken away. They did that. Like just those stories, which largely everyone's going to have. Like at some point, your family went somewhere and had nothing and had to start with nothing and build up from there somewhere, right? Like we didn't all just land on this planet with cities built and houses built and but businesses built. And to like realize that and realize that those people in your own family did that, I don't know, I find that tremendously inspiring.
Yeah. Well, I think it's if you just flip the lens a little and kind of just take a step to the right or the left or whatever and look at it from a different place, it has nothing to do with how much money did they make or how much impact did they have or how many friends did they have or if they have a day named after them. Just think about the mindset. Like as I met, my grandparents on my dad's side, late 1800s, deciding after getting married, let's leave the homeland and go to this place called Canada and start from nothing and build our life there. Like what it takes to do something like that,
Right.
and then to survive it and actually thrive and have, I don't know, I think they had 9 kids and raised them in this country. And like it that alone is amazing.
Yeah.
Forget whether they,
Sure.
built an empire out of it
Sure.
or, took over the country or the wealthiest family. And none of
Sure.
that matters. Just the
Yeah.
fact that you had the gumption, that's a good old word.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, the gumption and the confidence and whatever else it would take to do something like that.
Yeah.
That's what blows me away is and in my business as a financial advisor for years, I would meet people that would become clients that had immigrated to Canada, that had left their families. Like, they were either my age or, younger, slightly younger than me or whatever, that was the choice they made. And I would sit in awe of those people like, wow, this is like, you learned a whole new language. Like
Yeah.
that takes something, man. That's not just, hey, let's go do this. That's a lot. That's throwing in the towel on a lot of stuff and the comfort, right? That's like giving up comfort tenfold.
Yeah. 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 100%. And I can share, the wonderful thing about having this opportunity with Arthur was I asked him kind of one of those questions where he came to California after World War II, so World War II, I'm sure a lot of people know this, but maybe not everyone. The United States were at war with Germany, Japan, what do they call it? The axis of evil. So Japan is the enemy. Arthur's living in Japan at this time, even though he's born in Canada. There's a whole other story with, some of the Japanese that were in North America. But anyways, so Japan is the enemy. After World War II, Arthur brings the first Japanese company to California to do business. This is like in the early 60s. And he's a small man. And I was just like, Arthur, what was it like? And the headline is he ended up building that up to a very successful business in California and in North America, so much so that they gave him a day after him. But to come there, I was like, Arthur, what was that like to be the first Japanese company in there in California when before you were the enemy of America? And he's like, I was like, were you scared? Were you nervous? Like what was going through your head? He's like, yeah, I wasn't scared. And this is somewhere in our interviews. He was like, I just focused on serving the customer. Like I focused on making it about them. And he said, I was never scared. Like I knew there was an opportunity for my company from Japan. They made silicon, like they were making transistors and microchips. And so he came in ground level. He saw this opportunity and he wasn't scared because he knew he could serve his company and he could serve his customers in California. And he got in ground level Silicon Valley and helped build that thing up. But it wasn't never, what I never heard in his voice, it was never about him. He always made it about somebody else. And therefore he was never scared.
Right. And then I'm sure what he was also alluding to was all the people that worked in the company and serving them. Like it
Sure.
was all about serving.
Yeah.
Um, and, uh, and in the process of serving, you build,
Greatness,
that's how great companies are built. It's
right?
the idea of serving at a certain level. Right.
Right.
And carrying that on. I mean, if people don't want your stuff, there's nothing to serve.
Right. Yeah. If you're not thinking about what they actually need and want and making it for them, then you're right. There's no business there.
Yeah.
Unless you can, yeah, you're trying to convince. Anyways, yeah. But I know when I get nervous or scared, it's when I'm making it about me. Like, oh, how am I going to look, or how am I going to sound, or are they going to like me, or whatever. Right? I'll make it some story up about me. Whereas that's not what it's about, right? It's about I'm here to serve. We're making this show. I mean, not for us. Like, there's other things we could be doing, but
This isn't for us.
it's.
I'm
I mean, it
kidding.
is.
I'm
I
just,
mean, it does have to. There needs to be a point where
626, man.
it does have to be. There does need to be a part where it's fulfilling for us, right? We're not like doing this as a sacrifice or like
Right.
suffering doing it, but so there's a point where it fuels us, and we're doing this for others. We're doing this for our grandkids.
Yeah. That's presumptuous of me now to think I'll have grandchildren.
As soon as I said that, I was like, yeah,
like,
but that is putting a lot
maybe
of,
my kids are going to go, nah,
yeah,
I ain't
true.
doing that.
Yeah. For that generation, maybe if some other people discover this and be like, oh yeah, those guys, they had some good stuff to say. We appreciated that they put this out there.
Yeah. Back to your point you made earlier about we're having kids at later in life.
Yeah.
And so then those opportunities are, lost. Well, I was the last of 6 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So my dad was in his 40s
Right.
when he had me. And so, yes, I didn't have that experience of my grandparents. And then I duplicated that. I didn't have kids till I was in my 40s.
Right.
And so again, they never got to know their grandparents,
Right.
so much on my side anyhow.
Yeah.
On their mom's side, their grandma's still around. They spend a lot of time with her. So that's great that they have that experience. But yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, to really put this in context, like my kids' grandparents are all alive.
Yeah.
And, I have the awareness about how important those connections are.
Mm-hmm.
And, they do get to spend a decent amount of time with them, but not a lot of like one-on-one or alone time, or like I still remember my grandparents, even though I wasn't very old, on my dad's side, they would take my brother and I to Playland every year. And like, I don't think they said much or whatever, but just, I still remember that to this day, them being there with them. Like there was something about just that connection, that experience, that time.
That was their thing to do with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. They would go do that with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a good reminder for myself that like after this show, I'm going to think of ways and ask, both my kids and my parents, if there's ways that we could foster more time and connection for them to be together without me being there.
Yeah. I had a few uncles like that. That did some things like that. I remember when I was a kid, and I still remember them. Like I still remember, going to Kmart.
Okay.
Kmart with my uncle Phil. Because he needed to buy something, and he bought me, I think like a 2-cent bag of popcorn. That's how old I am. 2-cent bag of popcorn.
Yeah.
And like I was 5 years old. I still remember that. Like it was so cool.
Right.
That he did that.
Right. It wasn't something monumental, but it's just like, why does that stick? Why does that stick with you today? Like why, just that experience of going to Playland, and my grandparents didn't say much. Like what
my parents would never have bought me that bag of popcorn. That's why, because they would have been like, no.
Right. It's a new experience. It's something outside what what you know. And, I guess that's the thing too, we've talked about, is like kids have such limited experience of the world, really, like of being with adults, because they spend a lot of time with the same adults, largely, their parents. So they have, they're in that sort of world. They've got their teachers, so they're in that world, maybe some sports or teachers outside, coaches or music teachers or whatever, but they don't have, so I think, yeah, maybe those experiences with family that allow them to experience new things or the same things differently in some different perspectives. Like, yeah, maybe my parents wouldn't have taken me to Playland. So that was really special that my grandparents did.
Yeah. And then you get and the energy around it is different
Yeah,
because they're gonna focus on different things than what mom and dad, because we're all trained
sure,
to act a certain way around one another. Like we
sure.
train people how to treat us in a lot of
Sure.
ways, right?
Right.
So you
There's a
kind of get,
dynamic. Yeah.
yeah, you get stuck in the already always knowing or listening to somebody the way they are. And so you just run that pattern over and over again. So when you get an opportunity to go do something out of the ordinary with new people, it's an exciting new experience,
True.
and it's going to have a whole different dynamic to it and a whole different relationship around it that we love that.
Yeah.
And back to your volleyball experience, right? Like that for a kid is a whole new level of interacting, all of those
Yeah.
teams there, but then also all of those different adults there and
Yeah.
interacting with adults in a intense environment,
Yeah.
is a good thing.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there's a couple things I want to reflect on. Like, yeah, maybe I would go on different rides with my grandparents that my parents wouldn't have felt comfortable with me going on. Maybe, like you said, that your uncle's buying you that bag of popcorn that your parents wouldn't have. That at the end of the day, these adults usually know what's in the kid's best interest, and they're having some fun, and they're expanding the kid's mind. And then the same thing with this volleyball tournament. It was truly like it was a very memorable experience for me, and I hope and I think for the girls too, because some of them hadn't ever traveled without their parents before, so there was a big opportunity for them to really like spread their wings a bit, and they're teenagers, so it was I think very empowering for them to be like, I got this. I can travel on my own with some people that I don't normally travel with. So I know there was some large growth for some of the girls like that. You got a lot of energy, girls that want to do different things. So there's a lot. I mean, I'm a big fan of, I've even kept this wristband on from going to this tournament, like
Right.
this element of team. I just think there was so much that was amazing to witness about how the girls, I mean, there's 12 of them, and they all have, they're strong minded, they're strong willed, they all have different opinions. Like being able to, for them to be able to um, come together and come to an agreement, democratically, and figure out what they want to do. Where do they want to go to eat? We have some time off. Do we want to go to the mall? But to witness that and see that done well and healthily was quite a opportunity, quite an honor to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to be, like you were saying, like a different adult amongst that group for them. I was the only there was three or four moms, the two female coaches, and then there was me. And so just to have a different guy in that mixed with them, that and maybe just a different energy that they don't normally have around them. Like there was some I thought some really good opportunities for me to support the girls that were having quite a hard time maybe with being away, with some of the roommates, with just the energy of all this going on. So it was definitely quite a great experience for me to be a part of and to be able to support them. And man, those girls played amazing. Like this was national, so this is the highest level of competition that they can play at in their division. And they've had some ups and downs in the previous tournament, but to watch them come together when it's really on the line, and these games really matter in a pressure situation, and how well they played as a team was incredible.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's good to see, huh?
Yeah. I didn't play. I played almost every other team sport growing up, but I never played volleyball.
Mm.
But it's such a great. I don't know. I really like the sport. There's so much team to it. Like every play requires teamwork. Because it's 3 hits on the side usually, and every hit matters though in terms of how you set up the next person. If you set the bump up wrong, then the setter's got a problem. If the setter sets up the hit wrong, then the hitter's got a problem. Like there's so much element of team every point, and every play they come together and support each other. And there's so much that happens if you get off in terms of energy and down. The other team can just start rolling over you. Like yeah, there's a lot to it. I really like.
Yeah, it's I'm just sitting here thinking about how interesting that is just going back to your great uncle and the idea of building a company and coming to America to do it, and all of that would be required, because all of that you just explained is required
Hmm.
to build something successful, requires, a lot of people pulling a rope in the
Hmm.
same direction, and I often, I'm a huge hockey fan, so I love watching playoffs. Like right now is, the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I
Hmm.
love the intensity level. And what I'm always been amazed about, with hockey players, and I don't know every other sport, so I don't know what it's like there, but what I've always been amazed about with hockey players is how humble they are and how respectful they are of knowing how many people it took to get them to the highest level of competition
Hmm.
in their sport.
Right.
Like, it took mom and dad, driving how many hours to at the worst times of day to get to a hockey rink to practice. Like, because hockey's not like a lot of sport. You can't just, you know, grab a ball and go play in your backyard. Like,
Right.
it's not the same thing. There you need ice time, and ice time is expensive, and ice time has a lot of demands on it. So I remember practicing hockey at like 4:30 on a Saturday morning
Really?
when
Wow.
I was a kid. Yeah,
Yeah.
I grew up in Tsawwassen. There wasn't even a rink. Like, we had to drive to Richmond to practice.
Wow.
So, what my dad did for me in terms of doing that and enabling me to play is massive.
Right. Yeah, the travel to other rinks because typically it's playing someone quite far away too. I mean, yeah, I played hockey growing up too. It was a lot of, yes, definitely appreciating my parents for how much time in the car. I remember even getting dressed in the car because we be racing from school or from something else, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
sticking your shin pads and everything on in the car, and you're running out of the car with your skate guards on, and
Yeah, totally. See, and what's great is that when you're in it, you don't think about any of this stuff when you're
yeah,
in it. And that's perfect. Like, there's no reason to put all that weight on a kid of, you should pay, you should be, so grateful for this, like slamming that in their face. There's no point to that. I never heard those words out of my parents about that. But now I can look back and go, wow, what a gift that I had that experience.
yeah. Yeah, I don't think I mean, you want it to be genuinely expressed from the kids. So you don't want to have, you don't want to be a parent that's like, you must be grateful. You don't want to force them to express it, but it does feel really great, kids. If any kids or grandkids are listening to this, it does feel amazing when a kid does realize, wow, yeah, my parents just drove me a long way to do my thing. How amazing it is when they just stop and go, thanks,
Yeah,
dad.
yeah.
Thanks, mom.
Yeah, to recognize the commitment that's there, right? The
Yeah.
the team,
Yeah.
back to team, because that's part of the team.
Yeah. The family is a team.
Yeah. Well, you could look at it like that, or you could look at it as you're all against one another.
That
Depends.
can happen too. Yeah.
Yeah,
If you got just like the company, just like the hockey team, the volleyball team, I mean, if the family's pulling on the rope in different directions, you're going to have the same challenges, the same in the company. If you don't have an aligned vision, if you don't all agree, we're climbing that mountain. If everyone thinks there's a different mountaintop that they're climbing, that's going to be a problem. If they each think that there's a better way to get up the mountain and no one can agree, that's going to be a problem.
yeah.
But everyone's largely figured that out, right? I mean, every family knows which mountain they're climbing and they all are having fun climbing it. And, it's just easy, right?
Yeah. It's just easy. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was something that really struck me, is just this notion of team in this past week. Like, and just, I can see some people that haven't maybe had that experience playing on a team because they're just largely doing whatever they want on their own, like
Mm.
on this road trip. But there's just an experience of like, okay, I could see like, there's certain times where like we need to get to this place at this time, and there's this many kids, and there's only this many adults. So logistically, we need to kind of support each other and make sure this all happens so everyone gets to the next place on time and
Mhm.
together. But there would be an experience of sometimes people are just like, I'm just doing my thing, and they don't necessarily think about, well, we got to first think about the team here. Not first, but we got to at the same time, sure, you got to serve yourself. You don't want to be a martyr. And we also have to think then next, before we go and do our own thing, about, okay, what's the collective need here at the same time here? I can't just leave people stranded on an island.
Yeah. You just reminded me, I don't know, my brain just went back to the 2010 Olympics and the level of what that took. Like what, doesn't matter whether you like the Olympics or you don't, or you
Right.
think it's a waste of money, or, whatever political view you have on it. That's not the point. It's what it took to have had that level of organization, order,
Right. Right.
right? And, all of the moving parts to come together to, to just have that sport go on. It's sort of like the sport, the event itself, the sport, the game, the competition itself is like the smallest part of all of what it took.
Right. Right. The larger team that needed to come in together to make that whole thing happen.
Yeah, like the amount of people involved in, from the idea of, hey, we could do this,
Yeah. Yeah.
to then getting it to that date where
Sure.
the things start to happen. And then if you want to, and then you can look at it, well, then in each competitor, there's a whole team that was involved in getting that competitor to that event,
Sure.
right? And
Right.
all of those things that come together to do something like that,
Right.
the humanity, the order, the times that there's disorder,
Yeah.
back to reorder, like, things go wrong.
There's not enough snow.
Yeah, you think you have order all laid out, and then something happens, and now you find you're in a state of disorder, and then
Sure.
hopefully you have the ability to reorder yourself to get things back on track, which is kind of like our day-to-day lives. In my experience, is that we're always coming out of order into disorder and reordering and getting back to order in areas of life that we're living in. Relationships,
Sure.
have an order to them. They can also have a disorder to them, and then you could try to repair those relationships or reorder them. Like it's amazing how that cycle can play out so many times in our lives in so many different ways.
Right. Yeah. It's a great awareness, a great perspective. Like, I mean, you mean your things in your life just don't always work out exactly the way you want all the time?
No, it's not a straight
Oh,
line.
really?
It's just not a straight line.
Oh,
And
oh, my
and then
experience.
it's also, now that I see that, now that I have awareness to it, it's embracing each level of it.
Sure. Because
Ho
it's gonna like just knowing it's gonna happen, like not having that expectation everything's supposed to be, working out all the time. Like, no, there is going to be some disorder here. Let's just come to an agreement that that's probably going to happen. And then it's going to, but and then a really good team will be able to handle that really well, right?
Well, it's actually seeing the opportunity in the disorder.
Right.
There's something here that can come from this. What is it? And then that's where the reorder comes. I heard this thing, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. The suffering of today is the wisdom of tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But in order to get to that wisdom piece, you need to reconcile with the suffering. Well,
Disorder.
in order to get to the reorder, you've got to reconcile with the disorder
Right.
and embrace it. Like, it's like, okay, this is, this didn't go the way I wanted it to. Everything
Yeah.
seemed like it was going great. Now it's fallen into this, sort of, you can think of it as chaos,
Sure.
but it's in the chaos that creation happens.
Right.
You need that, out of chaos comes the creative force that brings us something brand new. So it's embracing the order when you have it. So even what we talked about earlier, like just being grateful for where I live and going out and experiencing, like, wow, look at what I get to breathe this in. This is so amazing. And then when things don't work out, embracing that, like, okay, what do I get to see from this? And then from that experience, maybe you can bring out something new and reorder yourself in a way that has, you know, transcends that current experience into something that's maybe even better than before.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. Out of chaos comes creation. Is what I heard you say there. And in just having a different mindset around it, like not suffering through the disorder or the chaos and being like, oh my goodness, why is this so confusing? Why is this so hard? Why is this here now? But looking at it differently, like, maybe something amazing will come out of this, right? Like if I can just find a way to reorder through this disorder, then maybe, like, if you think about it, some of the most amazing inventions have probably come out of chaos, right? Like they came out of really hard times. They came out of something that was like, this is a mess. We need to do something about this. We need to order this better. Like if I just think of like Google search, right? Like as a simple, very well-known example, like search, for those of us who remember, before Google was a disaster. Like it was really, you didn't know it, but it was like, man, you could barely ever get what you were looking for. You'd get all these, there's all these ways to hack the search, and you'd have to use like there was like one engine that would then serve five engines underneath it to try and get you some semblance of what you're actually looking for. And then these two guys were like, this is a fairly disorganized system right now. It's fairly chaotic. So what did they do? They downloaded the internet to these homemade computers in their dorm room and figured out a better way to organize it and put order to it and come out with this really intelligent, clever algorithm. It's like, boom, here's how to get you what you want,
Dude, you're giving me Dewey Decimal System vibes here.
Oh no. Okay. All right. We're going there.
Well, isn't that what?
Sure. Same.
Isn't that what it was at
sure.
the library when I was a kid? The Dewey Decimal System was all about trying to create, how do you put all these books in a library and organize them in a way where somebody could find one and then have a reference point, a search point, go to the cards.
Yeah.
Look up the subject, and then it's in, 389.7 area. Okay, let's go find the 389.7 area.
I wonder how many kids, if that are like, do your kids, like, I wonder if my kids know what the Dewey Decimal System is.
I don't even know if that. I'll ask them when I see them later. I'm going to ask them if at the library the old DD system is still around.
Have they experienced that? I mean, I hope so. But just maybe even also just to have them have that awareness that, like, imagine if we didn't have this. Imagine what it'd be like to go into a library and find what you want without that. Like that would have been chaos. And some people would be okay in that. They would just be like, I'll just grab the first book I see and that's fine.
Dude, I have a bookshelf right here to my left that is not organized in any fashion other than the size of the book.
Okay.
Because the shelves are a certain size, right? So it's like if you're this tall a book, you're on this shelf, and if you're this tall a book, you're on this shelf. But
and largely you can see what you've got, and you've got a subset of the bigger collection because it's stuff that you probably really love there. But I mean, some people could come into a library and just not care because they'll just grab whatever, right? They're not interested in the order. Some people could come in and be like, they freak out, right? They would just suffer because of that chaos, right? They're just like, I don't know how to handle this. This is overwhelming. And then they would have a different experience. Some people would come in and be like, maybe there's an opportunity here. I can see all these people coming in. I can see how stressed some people are. I can see how inefficient this is. Some people are really looking for what they want. They can't find it. What could I do about this?
Right. I'm curious what kind of people would hang out and watch us talk about the Dewey Decimal System. I actually want to touch on that because we're on some new channels today. Here's the thing is that, we're doing this because this is what we would do every week.
Right.
You and I would get on a call every Friday and just talk about our experience in life for the last week and anything that was going on. I know we're leaving out here some of the deeper personal stuff that we may want to support each other with. But large in the very large overall picture, this is kind of what we would do every Friday.
Yeah. And we're going to set up a separate private call for some of those other matters. But to let people know, yes, this is this concept of no extra time, largely. I mean, other than getting some of this tech working, this is a conversation you and I have already been having for years. We thought it'd be really great to share it with others. It's really not taking any more of our time because, time is precious, but we wanted to then think about, spending not much extra time talking about the same things and now serving others, not just ourselves. we think that there could be a lot of win-wins here.
Yeah. And it brings me back to that team idea, because
Hmm.
then you and I are bringing in all of the influences and the intake of information that we're gathering from others, because we're kind of similar in that way. We have a lot of people that we're related to, connected to, that we have these kind of conversations with,
Yeah.
that allow us to filter out things and begin to get an understanding of our lives, either through direct connection or reading or listening to podcasts or YouTube, or sourcing out information. That's sort of what I see a lot of my life is right now. It seems to be sourcing out information.
Okay. Yeah, and distilling it down, right? And
Yeah.
making sense of it, and then doing our best to share the maybe the nuggets, right? Like, just on this, like, as an example, you've shared many, having access to someone who's 103. Like, I had to fly to Japan to interview Uncle Arthur. Like, to me, there's a lot of privileged information that he's shared with me that I am very excited to share with people, right? And
Hmm.
now we get to distill that kind of content down and bring it through here, and hopefully share some really essential nuggets. The other thing I think about when we were talking about team is I recently got to have coffee with this gentleman who's started many companies. Recently, just sold and exited completely one that's a social media management platform. I don't know if he's comfortable with me saying his name and some of the details, but let's just say he teaches startups. He teaches business. He started many companies himself. He even has an incubator he started to help companies launch themselves. And I asked him, what's the number one thing you see for companies that have been successful, startups that have been successful? What's some of the top things that you see that have helped them be successful? And I think one of his first answers was doing it with other people, doing it as a team, being collaborative, involving others. And then so then I asked him, well, what's the number one thing that has led to companies failing? Going alone. Think you can do it all yourself. So just to tie it together in terms of people that we have conversations with, that we, have privileged access to, maybe, or just get the honor of spending some time with, and then being able to maybe combine some of that, distill some of that, and make some sense of it and share with others. That, to me, is a wonderful place to be. And hopefully, people get to hear this and get to learn from it.
Yeah. Yeah. I always bring everything back to my experience in a band,
Hmm.
in business. Like, it took, yeah, the band for me was like the perfect incubator for me understanding business. That it required, us working together, writing, having a creative idea together, and then each doing our part. Not only as a musician, your part there, but then even as we tried to expand our audience and reach more
Hmm.
people, we each took on roles within the band to do certain tasks, right? And as you were sharing that, I was thinking about, well, what about solo artists? And the first one that came to mind was Bryan Adams, who maybe a lot of people have heard of Bryan Adams, and you would think it's all Bryan, but Bryan's had the same guitar player working with him for his entire career,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
even though it's Bryan
As the
creating,
brand, as the
right?
front facing brand. Yeah.
He's also had a great manager who
Sure.
was very good at their job, who really understood the music industry, that was able to open doors for
Bruce
Bryan.
Allen.
And so, yeah, Bruce Allen and,
Yeah.
and Sam Feldman, right?
Yeah.
Feldman and Associates. Like there's the, what you think is just the artist being
Sure.
the genius
Sure.
and the creator of these ideas, but without all of the things that are, that have
The
faith in
team.
what you're doing, or a fan. Maybe they start off as a fan and just think,
Sure.
hey, you're really cool, man. I think I think you could do something, and I want to be involved,
Right.
right? Because I want to do this side of it. You do that, and
Sure.
I'll take care of this,
Sure.
right? And so now it's not that one person on their own. Like, it looks like it's one, but it's not. There's
Yeah.
a
How many people it takes for that one person to be
there's
on stage shining?
Yeah, and there's producer in the studio and an engineer that knows their job, and like all of those things are what come together, and they're bouncing these ideas off of people. Like, people are, given their creative ideas in a different way to what they're doing, and it all becomes part of the success. But in our minds, we just see it as, oh, look what they've accomplished. It's like,
Sure.
yeah, not
Sure.
so fast. There was a lot of people that, and in some cases, maybe they stepped on people because sometimes they're not nice when
Right.
they get there.
Yeah.
Right. There's been some, you've read stories or heard stories of people that maybe aren't so
Sure. Sure.
gracious.
They got there, yeah, one way or another, but there's different ways to go about getting there, building
Yeah,
up a team. Did you know my dad was on Brian Adams' team?
I did know that. That's
Yeah,
not
like
why I thought of him, but
no, but just what it takes. Like there's someone doing his taxes.
yeah, his
That was
accounting.
that was my dad for
Yeah,
decades.
there you go. Like making sure all that's in order.
Right? Like, making sure he understands all the rules of when you're traveling the world making income in a band. My dad's having to figure out all the tax rules for how you would do that,
Right.
minimizing Brian's tax exposure.
Yeah. So that he can continue to do what he's doing
Yeah,
and
make
not,
his
make a
yeah,
living doing it. Right. Obviously, he did very well for himself.
yeah,
And had a huge fandom, so that's great. But yeah, that's a huge piece. Like who nobody thinks of that. Like you don't think of
sure.
that stuff. You just don't.
Right.
It,
Who's in this guy's taxes?
yeah, I wonder who's doing Brian. As I'm at the concert and I saw him recently. Actually, it was a great
Oh yeah,
show,
oh
and
yeah, yeah,
I
right,
wasn't there going. I wonder who takes care of Brian's taxes. That's
right.
probably really important.
Yeah, or legal matters, and I mean, there's all kinds of people on the back end of the team, right? That just we wouldn't. I mean, Alan, he's on our team, but no one gets to see him. But without him, like a lot of this tech wouldn't be working, or he's giving us a lot of reassurance. He went and checked every feed, make sure it's all working, and then he had to
Right.
jump on his own call with his other
Thank
team.
you, Alan. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got his team call at 6:30. So, he gets this team going, gets on another team call with a bunch of guys like we have. We have our men's group, which I would definitely consider one of the most amazing teams in my life. That every
Right.
week for coming up 9 years, we've gotten together
What?
as a team, right? Every week for an hour.
That's insane.
Yeah. We're team, I put it as team 001. We had ambitions to have more teams like us.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I'll probably miss our call next week because I'll be traveling with one of
Oh
the
yes.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a matter of, it's interesting when you're on a, if you, depending on the well, this is a whole other topic for another day, but just values, priorities, how to order things when two things are really important, like you traveling with your daughter and our men's group team. Like I know that's, but I appreciate that family first in that matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think I will. I mean, I'm planning that, I'll be somewhere in Michigan
Yeah.
on a meeting with a bunch of people that
Right.
I'm not going to excuse myself to be on the
Yeah.
call.
Yeah. Their schedule, it's a rare opportunity. It's a rare
Exactly.
time. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. But that's been an amazing team.
Yeah.
It is an amazing
I can't
team.
believe we're
Amazing
coming up
team.
to 9 years. Holy smokes.
Yeah. Yeah. Commitment. That's a whole other topic.
Well,
Priorities.
bro, it's 2 minutes to. I've got a hard stop on the hour. So
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone joining probably right now that, so we can probably, just close things up here nicely at the end here. I do appreciate the one comment from Indefatigable. Oh, that's a really bad name. I don't even know what it is, that asked us to help, they could promote us on Twitch.
yeah.
Thank you, Lenata, for joining us. I see on Instagram there. We're still trying to figure this out. If you do leave us a comment, it's supposed to bring all of those in here.
Yeah.
But Alan did check that all our feeds worked. We will post this on. I was remiss. I didn't get, trying to get all this tech and permissions. Alan was going to help, but he can't get access to some of these files. And anyways, we'll get this sorted as we build out the team. We will get the last episode and this one on Spotify shortly, and on Apple Podcasts, so that those who weren't able to join us live, I do know a lot of people listen to us on their own time, so appreciate that. Another reason we're doing this live is because we just time-wise, we want to make this real. We want to make this raw. We don't want to edit a bunch of stuff. Just as part of being real.
Editing, schmediting.
And just time-wise, like we got a lot of stuff to do in our lives, so we want to just make this real, raw, put it out there for you guys to hear. We're not going to waste your time, but we hope that we can be of value and of service to you. So,
yeah. Thanks, brother.
All right, man. Huge love to you. Have an awesome day.
Huge love to you. Have a great day.
All right.
Okay, bye, everybody, for hanging out with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Now what do I do?
Leave. I'm hitting the